So for my next video, I wanted to talk about knowing your triggers, and how important this is and has been for me as a means of recovering from depression and anxiety. So after you've seen a mental health professional and you've gone and you've gotten help, as you work towards getting better, towards resuming your normal life, you start doing the things that you used to do before you were affected by these mental health conditions. There's some things that I have found along the way that are really important to understand as far as certain things that may trigger your anxiety and send you, back in the wrong direction when it comes to getting better. So again, just as a disclaimer, I am not a doctor. I'm not a mental health professional. What I am is somebody who's suffered with these conditions for 21 years. And there are some things I've learned along the way that have really helped me. And the purpose of the channel is to share those things with others and to remind those people out there experiencing these conditions that they're not alone. So when it comes to me and things that I have found that trigger me, one thing, and this has been shown again through studies, one thing that can trigger you is watching the news, believe it or not. Now, all of us want to know what's going on. I'm not encouraging anybody to, not ever watch the news and be ignorant as to world events and, local news in their own communities. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is people with our mental health conditions, sometimes something that starts off as just us paying attention to what's going on around us can quickly turn into us starting to perseverate and focus on things that can either scare us or trigger us. And these are things that we can't control, right? Now let's think about it. What is the purpose of the media? Now, it would be nice if their main purpose was just to inform us, to bring information to the people. But the people I'm speaking with that watch this channel are intelligent people. So they know that very quickly an event turns from an event to a ratings war. So they are trying to get you to stay locked in. So when you watch the national news, it's going to be scary. They're going to say things that scare you, whether they're talking about inflation or wars or politics. They want you to stay glued to the set so that they can make their money. That is the whole purpose of it. And if you've been around since, 9/11 and you saw what happened there, you saw how quickly that went from such a tragic event that it was to being just this thing that the major news media is used to keep you locked in, to the next event. What's the next thing that's going to happen, So for a regular person, this might not be that big of a rabbit hole. But for people with mental health conditions who are always already worrying and prone to worry about things they can't control, I've found that if I watch the news too much, too frequently, that I will start to think more about things that I can't control. And this is something that I have learned over the course of the last 21 years. And I've gotten really good at keeping up on world events without having them, without getting caught in that game of, waiting on every event, every little detail of every story. And so I've gotten a lot better at that. And they've actually done studies that show that if you pay, the more you pay attention, especially to the national news, people's moods are actually affected by that, even neurotypical people. And I think people with mental health issues, that's going to just be amplified. I know it is with me. And for those of you who, are still struggling, who are still in the depths of either a clinical depression or anxiety disorder, I have been relatively good since about 2009, 2010, but I have had relapses. And, I've also been pretty good about knowing this trigger about the news. But what do you think happened in 2020 when the pandemic broke out? The state that I live in was one of the harshest affected by the pandemic. And every day there's a body count. I found myself, as I relapsed, getting sucked into that vortex that, oh, I can't control. Oh, I'm scared. I'm catastrophizing. And they aren't trying to dissuade you from feeling that way. They want you. They just want you to watch, because that's how they get paid, through advertisement upon you watching and staying glued to their network or their radio program, whatever it is. So that's one that can be really insidious. And I encourage you, if you suffer especially from anxiety, but even from depression, if you suffer from either one of those conditions, stay abreast of what's going on. Don't be ignorant. I'm not saying that, but make sure that that doesn't start to take over, and you don't tune in. I would say don't ever tune in more than once a day to the national news. And this will help. This will go a long way, at least it has for me, and not triggering that way of thinking where, oh boy, this is happening, that's happening. Again, all things you can't control. If somebody out there can control inflation or hunger, world hunger, or, wars, let me know. I've got some favors to ask of you. But that's beyond men's control, especially an individual's control. So that's why I find that can be a trigger. And it's something that I want people out there to know, to make sure this is, in the United States, this is an election year. They're doing everything they can to get you to watch every second of their networks. And that is probably not going to be the best thing for somebody with one of these anxiety spectrum disorders. It tends to trigger me. And so that's one trigger. Now, even neurotypical people can somewhat be triggered by something like the national news. But another trigger, believe it or not, that I have, and I've noticed over the years, is watching sports. If you'll believe it or not, it's real easy to slip into that habit of, if you want a desired outcome. First of all, I run hot and cold anyways. So your team wins your way up, your team loses your way down. That's always kind of been how I was, even before I had, anxiety or panic disorder or clinical depression. But what I'll notice, especially if you're affected by obsessive compulsive disorder, it's real easy to let magical thinking creep in as you're watching sports. Now, when I'm all the way in a full recovery, I don't really have any issue watching sports. And if I feel myself starting to either be too invested or, like somehow I'm having something to do with the outcome, I usually will just shut it off now. But it sounds silly. And if you don't have these anxiety spectrum disorders, the fact that, or the idea that a sporting event could start making you start to magical think and thinking you're controlling things you're not, probably sounds ridiculous. And if it still sounds ridiculous to you, then you're probably okay watching sports. Watch all the sports you want. But if you notice that might be a trigger for you, I know for me it has been. And again, I'm just trying to help people out there with similar conditions as I have to help keep you from falling into that you're controlling things you're not really controlling. And then also the emotional roller coaster. If you're in a good place, it's not an issue. But if you're just recovering from clinical depression, or you're just recovering from severe anxiety, generalized anxiety disorder, panic disorder, whatever, it might be a little overstimulating for you, and it also might make your thinking start to shoot more in that magical thinking direction, which is not good as you're recovering from these disorders. Another thing that you might notice might be a trigger for you: spending time around certain people. Now, there are people that we have to spend time around every day, whether it's in our homes, at our jobs, and those people, we have to learn how to get through that, even with our mental health conditions. But if there's somebody that we don't need to spend a tremendous amount of time around, especially as we're recovering, because maybe they're the person that always has the drama. Maybe they're the person that after you get done talking to them, you feel like you ran a marathon. And what I've noticed is I have a very finite amount of mental energy to devote to a stressful, emotional conversation. And again, you need these for your family, for your close relationships. But if it's something extra that you don't need, and I'm not telling you not to be friends with somebody or to just say, get lost, you stress me out. But maybe just as you're getting better, maybe just limit your association with this individual or individuals, because again, you're trying to get better, and the nervous system can only take so much. You need to, again, as I mentioned before, you want to make sure you're hitting the 3 things. You're getting a good night's sleep, or at least as close as you can. You're getting good quality of sleep. You're exercising, trying to exercise at least 3 times a week for 30 minutes. And you're eating in a balanced way, or at least in a way that's not controlling you. You're controlling it. So if you do those 3 things, that'll help you also in your recovery. And I mention them in almost every video because even though they're, it's not sexy to talk about them, they are really important as far as getting better from mental health issues. And especially as you've seen it, you've gone through therapy, maybe you're on a medication, getting those 3 things in order will really help speed up the process of recovery. Now I'm mentioning these things, and I just want to be very, very clear about this. Don't avoid these things altogether. I'm not saying that. Like I've told you, the news can trigger me. Sports can trigger me. Hanging around certain people can trigger me. It can trigger my anxiety. It can trigger my depression. So as important as it is not to spend too much time to activities that trigger us, and again, your triggers might be completely different than mine. But we also can't avoid these things, right? Because then we run the risk of withdrawing, becoming, agoraphobic, disconnecting from, our environment and the people we know and love. So we don't want to move in that direction either. So it's a bit of a balancing act. But I made this video especially for people who are recovering, because, when you're recovering from anything, if you broke your leg, you wouldn't go out and start jogging the next day. And if you're just getting better from clinical depression, or you're getting better from anxiety, you don't want to do things that will aggravate the anxiety and the depression. These are like 3 things that I found that trigger me. Some things you might think would trigger you, and they don't trigger you. So maybe these things don't trigger you, so don't worry about them. But if you notice there's something that starts your thinking in the wrong direction, or you feel exhausted after you do, those are the things you need to watch out for. And you need to know these things, because I'll tell you this too. I've been in a pretty good place now for a few years, and I still have to watch all these things. If I start not getting sleep, things will go poorly. If I start eating in a reckless fashion, things will go poorly. If I start not exercising, things will go poorly. Also, if I start ignoring my triggers and just indiscriminately start watching the news or social media, there's another thing that you might have to stay off from when you're experiencing these mental health conditions. Especially, I've noticed clinical depression and social media, and I'll probably make a whole video about this at some point. But remember, that's a snapshot of someone's life. So it seems like everybody is having the time of their life on social media. And you know that some of those people the next day, they're either getting divorced or some other terrible thing is happening. But that's just a snapshot that they want the world to see. And it's been shown again that social media really can especially affect people who are depressed, because they think, boy, look, everyone else is fine and happy. And, and what are these people doing? These people are on there with the perfect picture, with a filter, and it has nothing to do with reality, what's really going on even in their life. But it can make us feel bad if we're in a bad spot mentally. So, the bottom line is learn your triggers, learn what they are, whether it's social media, news media, a certain association around certain people, something silly like I have with watching sports, whatever it might be. Just keep track of those things as you get better, because you'll want to learn them so that A, you can refrain from them as you're recovering, and then B, after you've recovered, you don't start to slip back into bad habits. You'll start to recognize when, I'm starting to magical think, I'm starting to make connections that aren't real connections, or boy, after I watch that, I feel terrible. I'm thinking about horrible things all day long after I watch the news, the national news, for an hour. It's, getting better takes effort, and you have to be aware and pay attention to what really bothers you and what really triggers a stress response. So that's about all I want to say in this video. Hopefully somebody finds it helpful. I know that to people who aren't experiencing these conditions, some of these things may sound silly, but I think it's important that for the people out there who are experiencing them, that they hear someone else talk about it openly, so that they know that they're not the only ones, so that they know what to look out for, and so that they get to know themselves in a way where it allows for them to be able to recover and to stay recovered. So I just wanted to thank everybody for all of the comments, all of the likes and the shares. If you know of anybody who may be benefited by this channel, please encourage them to visit. All of you who watch these videos, any of you who watch these videos, please feel free to subscribe. I plan on, again, improving some of the technical aspects of these videos, since I am extremely novice. Also want to start perhaps doing some interviews as things develop. But thank you so much, and until the next video, take care.